love, honor, and respect. This is Ross Ben coming at you today, December 1st, 2023, with a relevant message. I've been not too active on the YouTube scene for several months, especially after October 7th. And I've been getting, contact from certain ones saying, "What's up, Ross? We need your insight. We need your 40 years of experience being a student of history, mystery, and prophecy to help us understand what we're seeing in the world today." And for a while, I didn't really know what to say. I do think I can articulate some things now. But that's what we're here to do today, as a humble servant of humanity. And the angle of prophecy that I'm sharing, the foundation, comes from His Imperial Majesty, Haile Selassie, Rastafari, the mystic revealer of prophecy, to really understand his role in that. You got to know the prophecies this man fulfilled and how it relates to what them call end time prophecy. Because this man in 1930 fulfilled prophecy of Revelations, of being the one that would open and loose the 7 seals that were binding the book of life when he was crowned King of Kings, Lord of Lords, conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, and received his throne name, Haile Selassie, at his coronation, November 2nd of that year, fulfilling that prophecy of Revelations. Weep not, behold, the conquering Lion of the tribe of Judah, from the root of David, has prevailed to open the book and loose the 7 seals. Also at his coronation, Rastafari fulfilled the prophecy of Psalm 68, which said, "Princes shall rise out of Egypt, and Ethiopians shall stretch forth their hands and hearts unto Jah." What? Many feel His Majesty also fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy of the wonderful counselor that says, "For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called the Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and the Prince of Peace." Many also feel His Majesty fulfilled Isaiah's prophecy of world peace. The lion shall lay down with the lamb, and swords shall be hammered into plowshares. What? Yeah. They feel He did these things because of the historical events the Lion of Judah accomplished, being the Emperor of Ethiopia and the only sovereign African leader able to avoid colonialism. The Lion of Judah, who drafted the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. The Lion of Judah, who conceived and championed the United Nations principles and pillars of international morality, collective security, and global disarmament, the three pillars upon which international relations are supposed to stand. And the Lion of Judah, the only world leader to address both the League of Nations and the United Nations. So, as a student of history, mystery, and prophecy in the year 2016, inspired by His Majesty, I participated in a Free Your Mind conference here in the city of Philadelphia. And the way my participation unfolded that year was kind of mystic, because this was the third Free Your Mind conference I have been a part of. And I knew the relevance of, having the opportunity to be able to speak at these things. And I took it serious. And so I was meditating hard on what was going to be my topic and what was I going to speak on, And it was real slow to come, which is odd for me. Usually I'm quick with inspiration, for research. But it was coming slow to the point that they already put out the schedule before I submitted the title. So they just had me down for deep occult history because they knew that's how I came, So I was studying the schedule and I saw one of the headliners was a man named Ken O'Keefe. And I wasn't familiar with him, so I started studying him. And I saw one of his key works was holding the United States and is it real accountable before the United Nations for, behaving with international morality. And so when I saw that, I was like, all right, now I know what I'm going to focus on. I'm going to focus on the mystic Philadelphian roots of U.S. and is it real relations. And yeah. That presentation is on my Rosben 188 channel, but it's 6 and 7 years old. So the relevance of it isn't seen by ones today, but October 7th and the events that have unfolded since has made this information very relevant. So what I've done today is I've updated it. I've updated the original presentation. Why? Because it's already recorded and documented and on my YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out. But I updated it to make it more relevant to many of the questions I'm hearing pundits on Fox and CNN and BBC attempt to answer, Noam Chomsky attempt to answer. Why are the white right-wing evangelicals who, as far as U.S. society is concerned, have conspiracy theories against ones called, Jews. But then at the same time, they're supporting a Jewish state in the Middle East. What's going on, You got to know the deep occult history, the mystic Philadelphian roots of U.S. Israel relations to understand what you're looking at. You need to know the prophetic stage of 2024 to know what you're looking at. So that's what we're going to penetrate tonight. And yeah. Strap in, get ready. Get your tea, get your medi, get ready, because we're about to go in. So, being a student, 30, 40 years into prophecy, it takes a turtle to go down the rabbit hole of prophecy. Because prophecy's rabbit hole is deep. You can't, dip in it all quick and think you're going to understand the keys to prophecy. And to be honest, the fullness of understanding of prophecy comes through mystical revelations, having the right relationship with the flow of space-time. And the way we do that, first thing we got to do, we got to assume responsibility for our place and our condition in space-time. I hear some people say other people's ancestors is responsible for their place and their condition in space-time. Me, myself, I like to look at my ancestries as being responsible for my place and my condition in space-time, as well as myself, because it gives me continuity with myself and the flow I'm in. Another thing, we can't be in that victim-villain paradigm, because more often than not, when you study it, ones we look at as villains, at some point, they've been on that victim reality. And what happens is the victim villain paradigm gets you caught up in time loops. Why? Because historic timelines come full circle. So if we want to transcend trauma loops, the trauma and drama loops, ourselves, our families, our bloodlines, our collectives, and our humanity we find ourselves in. We gotta, get this relationship with the flow of space-time. Once we do this, guess what? We can look in the waters that flow like space-time. We can look in and we can see deep in the water. It's clear. You can see the bottom, down to the bottom, to the depths. into the root of what it is we're seeing. So being a 40-year student of history, mystery, and prophecy today, this is where we at. And I'm thankful for the opportunity to share these things with you. So now, let's say you're a man, you're a person that considers yourself a person of power and influence, right? And not only are you a person of power and influence, you want to exert that power and influence in the ultimate way, the most powerful way. What's the way you're going to be doing that? You're going to be attempting to control, manipulate, and determine the outcome of historical and prophetic timelines. It's important. It's important to understand, students of history, mystery, and prophecy. We got to understand this because it's this intention behind a lot of the historic and prophetic events that we witness, okay? Because with that in mind, we have to know that there are 4 nefarious ways to manipulate prophetic timelines. And these 4 nefarious ways are what has put us on the prophetic stage of 2024. And we have to understand these things if we really want to understand what we're seeing and witnessing. The first is called anathema. Anathema is nothing new. It's an ancient technique, to be honest, played out in a lot of ways in the Nile Valley. And, you know, what they call the clash of the Titans. Titans versus the Olympians, which played out historically in the Nile Valley of Kemet as the Memphites versus the Thebans. But we're not going to get all deep into that tonight. We're going to start with the prophetic manipulation that occurred in Rome when anathema was enacted on the Book of Enoch. And anathema means to make as if it never existed. And as far as what we would call Judeo-Christian prophecy, the Book of Enoch is the original prophetic timeline, the original unaltered timeline is the Book of Enoch. And in Rome, the Book of Enoch was made as if it never existed. So not only was the Book of Enoch destroyed, but all other scripture that had strong reference to Enoch was eliminated. Priesthoods and orders that upheld the prophecies of Enoch, they were eliminated. And so once that occurred, prophecies of revelations became the driving prophetic vision that guided most of Rome. Okay? So that's anathema. Another way is to pervert and distort prophetic teachings. So right off the bat, we can say anything that's not Enochian prophecy may be a perversion and a distortion of original prophetic teachings. But we're not going to get into all deep into that tonight. To be honest, because I now see the relevance of these prophetic teachings and I always knew the relevance of it, but now I see more people are becoming aware of the relevance and want to be able to articulate these things. Beginning in 2024, I'm going to establish a Patreon community where, subscribe community members. We're going to, our first series of classes is going to be the Prophetic Stage of 2024. We're going to go deep. We're going to go, we're going to, yeah. When you finish this series, you're going to be able to articulate clearly prophetic teachings and prophetic mysteries that are creating the reality that we see today. My earnest students who, if I give you the fishing rod, you're going to do your own fishing tonight. Hey, you're going to get what you need, but hopefully it'll inspire you to go deep with us in the community and even share what you've added and multiplied onto these equations, So look for more details about that. But we're going to proceed. Another way to manipulate prophetic timelines is to pervert or distort prophetic teachings. We're going to look at some examples of this, and particularly the relevant examples that have really set the stage for, the prophetic scene we see today. And in order to do that, we have to start with the character Ptolemy Philadelphus, who was Ptolemy II, the Ptolemaic pharaoh right after Alexander the Great. Okay? He was pharaoh of Egypt in Hellenistic Grecian times from 283 to 246 BCE. During Ptolemy II's reign, Hellenistic Greece was at its heights, and it was Ptolemy Philadelphus who was responsible for the famous University and Library of Alexandria. Even though many people associate the name Philadelphia, meaning brotherly love, I'm going to tell you right now, Ptolemy Philadelphus was not named that because, he loved his brothers. In fact, one of the wild historical events attributed to him is after his father died and, him and his brothers were scrambling to gain control of the Ptolemaic Empire. He killed two of his brothers. Okay? So this man, what that's called fratricide, Ptolemy the Philadelphus, committed fratricide. So his title, Philadelphia, the sibling lover, didn't come because he practiced brotherly love. He earned the title because, again, as a part of attempting to consolidate his control over the Ptolemaic Empire, he married his sister, Arsinoe II, and together they became the sibling lovers, the sibling gods of Hellenistic state religion. Okay? They were another title they received was the Thei Adelpho, the sibling gods. Okay? And why this is relevant is because Ptolemy Philadelphus was the driving force behind translating the Hebrew Bible into the Greek Septuagint, which was the, foundation of, most Bibles we read today, King James, or you name it, right? So Ptolemy Philadelphus used this opportunity of translating the ancient scriptures into Greek to insert his family, himself, his community into end time prophecy. And this is how chapter 3 of Revelations earned the title, The Prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia. Okay? And the Church of Philadelphia is the one community named in end time prophecy as the community that will receive grace on Judgment Day. So this is important. Revelations chapter 3, prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia and its fulfillment is what's driving a lot of what we see today. Okay? And the next big manipulation of prophetic timeline kind of fell out of this, where in the Alexandrian world, again, the world created by the collection of scriptures accumulated at the Library of Alexandria, right? The prophetic distortions that came out of that. One in particular that is known historically as the apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius. Now, the name itself tells you it's almost Methodius. It's fake Methodius, pseudo-Methodius. Why? Because historians have recognized that this prophetic writing that was written in the 7th century in Syriac, in a language related to ancient Hebrew, but found in modern Syria, that, this scripture even though it is ascribed to Methodius, Methodius didn't write it. Why? Because Methodius was an early church father that lived about 300 years earlier in Macedonia and Olympus, Grecian Olympus. And, you know, he didn't write it. Someone wrote it 300 years after him and ascribed it to him and said, like, yeah, these were his prophecies. So it's earned the name, the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius. It's an obvious distortion of prophetic timelines, okay? But it's in the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius where we first see prophecy of an end-time Christian society full of homosexuality, swinging, and cross-dressing. It's in the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius that for the first time we see in end-time prophecy teachings of the sons of Ismail, or Muslims, emerging from the desert to execute judgment on Christians who slipped into depravity. And it's in the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius that for the first time we see introduced in the prophecy this idea of an emperor, savior of Rome, who redeems the Christian world of its sins and drives the sons of Ismail out of the lands, or Muslims out of the lands. So this is a major distortion of end time prophecy, but we see it is it's a foundation of what we're seeing today, you know? And the importance of the Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius is that it established prophetic vision for the quote unquote Christian world from what is considered the end of the classical world up to the Crusades. Okay? So a distorted prophetic vision is what steered the vision of prophecy in the quote unquote Christian world, or what they would call the Roman world, Roman Christian world, from the end of classical Rome to the beginning of the Crusades. Hey, don't believe Ross Ben. Research it yourself. Read and check it out for yourself. Research it yourself. But again, this is something we're going to penetrate deeply in our Patreon community. It's first session on prophecy. The next major prophetic distortion we have to be aware of is called the Book of John Mandeville. This is a book that basically defined the prophetic vision of the age of the Crusades. John Mandeville is depicted as a knight of Great Britain, who has completed a pilgrimage. The path of which he took was from Britain to Constantinople, and then Constantinople to Jerusalem. Because he was a Christian knight conducting a pilgrimage through Muslim, Jewish, and Christian territory, he is supposedly, presenting the safe way for following pilgrims to be able to travel. And he uses it as an opportunity to reinforce Christian values, describe the lifestyle of Christians, Muslims, and Jews that he encounters on the way, and critique them accordingly, But in a lot of ways, the book of John Mandeville echoes the intentions we see embedded in the apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius, right? But the book of John Mandeville inserts another distortion of end-time prophecy that's important us to be aware of in this time. And that's that this idea that the people who, and I guess, original prophecy were identified as Gog and Magog, Eastern Europeans of Slavic identity, as the lost tribes of Israel. What? And so, here is that caption from the book of John Mandeville, where he says, in that same region, in the mountains of the Caspian, between those mountains, the Jews of 10 lineages are enclosed, that men close to Goth and Magog, or Gog and Magog, and they may not go out on no side. There were enclosed 22 kings with their people. And he goes on to say that King Alexander, chased them there. Okay? So here we are again, this idea that the legacy of Alexandrian empire defining the prophetic stage that is being manipulated. Here we see it continue in the book of Sir John Mandeville, right? And, he describes how the Jews in end time prophecy are going to oppress Christians, right? And then say, what? Listen to this. For the Jews say that they know well by their prophecies that they of the Caspia shall go out and spread throughout all the world, and that the Christian men shall be under their subjugation as long as they have been in subjugation of them. What? So here is the beginning. This is the beginning of, the prophetic distortion of how those that occupy, is it real today? How did the sons of Ashkenaz, who are in the table of nations from Gog and Magog, how do they claim prophetic birthright to Jerusalem and occupy the Middle East? Here is the first prophetic distortion, the book of John Mandeville. And how do we know it's a prophetic distortion? Because it's a historical fact. Most people that have researched the book of John Mandeville say, A, if the author of this book traveled to all these places, he made up a lot of what he saw. It was fanciful because the stuff he talks about isn't there. And beyond that, he echoed findings from previous expeditions that informed British society before this book came out. And, you know, it's an obvious fabrication to kind of be used as propaganda to inspire ones on pilgrimages and crusades from Britain. Okay? Don't believe Raspin. Do the research yourself. All of the teachings that Mandeville teaches about prophecy, it's distorted, fabricated, made up, confabulated prophetic teachings. But why is it important? Is because the book of John Mandeville set the prophetic vision of British Israel and really the United States from the crusade. It set prophetic vision from the time of the Crusades on up in the Roman world. What major perversion of prophetic teachings that we have to be aware of. If we want to understand how we got on the timeline, the prophetic timeline we are on in 2024, these are the things we have to be able to articulate and the things we need to know about. Again, we're going to go deep on our Patreon community, but I'm giving you the keys right here, okay? This brings us to more recent times. Another major distortion of prophetic teachings was all related to the birthing of Philadelphia, okay? And you have to know, with the United States being born out of Philadelphia, okay? All of this, the Great Mystery Philadelphia shows that all of this that we talk about in birthing Philadelphia extends to the United States. So these are the prophecies that are really, the manipulation of prophecies that are responsible for the birth of the United States. Okay? And it's all anchored in this person right here, a woman named Jane Ward Lee, who wrote these works right here, propositions extracted from the reasons for the foundation and promotion of a Philadelphian society. Okay? So this was the Philadelphian Society was, for lack of a better word, a Rosicrucian order that met in London in the late 1600s for the expressed intention of manipulating Revelations chapter 3, the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia. And yeah, to really understand that, you have to understand this woman, Jane Ward Lead, and her prophecies. Okay? And again, this is going to be something we go super deep in our Patreon community. But I'm going to give you a taste of how she, manipulated prophecy such that let me even back up, because another way you can manipulate prophetic timelines nefariously is to read prophecy, then enact historic events that mimic fulfillment, but ultimately serve a nefarious intention. And this was the technique Jane Lee used in setting the prophetic stage to birth the city of Philadelphia. Okay? And how do we know this? Because when she is asked what scriptures inspire the birth of the Church of Philadelphia that you speak of, Jane Lee, she doesn't go to Revelations chapter 3, the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia. This is what she says. There were some scriptures brought to my mind as that of the prophetical passage in the 45th Psalm. The daughters of Tyre shall be there with a gift. What? Tyre, Phoenicia, and Carthage being the historic enemy of Rome. Even the rich among the people shall entreat thy favor. What? Even the wealthy are going to be serving you in this Church of Philadelphia, this city of Philadelphia, huh? Then also in the prophet Isaiah, surely the ships of Tarshish, which is Gibraltar, the gateway to the Atlantic, shall wait to bring their sons from afar, their silver and gold with them. So what? Pirating in the Atlantic, the transatlantic enslavement trade. This is a part of building your city, your city of Philadelphia, and you're using prophecy to set it up. It is there also promised that the sons of strangers would build up the walls of Zion, bringing their forces and riches to her, and that their kings should minister unto her. What? These are the perverted and distorted biblical prophecy you're used and using this prophetic language out of its original context to establish Philadelphia. That promise was likewise brought to my remembrance. Strangers shall stand and feed your flocks. The sons of the alien shall be your plowmen, and your vine dressers. But ye shall be named the priests of the Lord. Men shall call you the ministers of our God. Ye shall eat the riches of the Gentiles, and in his glory shall ye boast yourselves. Now it is shown to me that these prophecies do appertain to the new model church, and will have their fulfilling according as it shall grow up as the state of childhood to that of perfect manhood. What? So here we are, these perversions of biblical prophecy, using prophetic teachings out of context to mimic the fulfillment of Revelations chapter 3, the birth of the community, the fulfillment of the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia, but do it in such a way that, you got all these nefarious intentions built into it, right? How does that manifest? How will we put it in other words? Jane Lead was using prophecy to resurrect the Roman Empire in such a way that prophecy of the grace through judgment would be inverted and fall upon the Roman Empire. So just to recap, before we, go deeper into this, I want us to really understand the prophetic stage that we have set for Philadelphia, the Holy Experiment, before we get any deeper, okay? It starts with the Greek Philadelphia, Ptolemy Philadelphus, and Arsinoe II, inserting themselves in the end time prophecy, naming themselves the community that receives grace on Judgment Day, thus creating Revelations chapter 3, prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia, right? Then you have in Roman times, an annihilation, a destruction of knowledge and awareness around the original prophetic timeline as it is found in the book of Enoch. So the unaltered original prophetic timeline becomes anathema, as if it never existed. Then you have the apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius that introduces what we would call the Alexandrian prophetic script, the prophetic script written by the Ptolemy Philadelphus, being the man who founded the Library of Alexandria. So the apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius, introducing Alexandrian prophetic script of a Christian-Muslim conflict over Jerusalem, defining end-time prophecy. That is echoed in the travels of Sir John Mandeville, which more or less defines end-time prophecy from the Crusades up through what I guess we could call Jane Lead's manipulation of prophecy through, her Philadelphian prophecies. But the travels of Sir John Mandeville, beyond echoing a Apocalypse of Pseudo-Methodius. He identifies Eastern European descendants of Gog and Magog as intermingled with the 10 tribes of Israel. So it's these major manipulations of prophecy that has set the prophetic stage of what we're seeing today. Okay? And yo, you got these keys. Now we're going to go a little deeper because, to be honest, to understand what we're seeing in the Middle East today, what prophecy is attempted to be manipulated, and how and why the U.S. is, so caught up in this with, is it real? We got to understand the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia, chapter 3, and Jane Lee's manipulation of it. All right? So, as we've been saying, Revelations chapter 3 is the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia. That church is identified as the congregation that kept the faith. In Revelations chapter 3, there's a message to 7 churches or 7 communities throughout the world, right? 6 of the churches that receive a message, those messages are harsh. It's judgment, fire, brimstone, calamity, judgment. There's only one church that receives a benevolent prophecy, and that is the Church of Philadelphia. Okay? Philadelphia's, I will just say, the key verses in Revelations chapter 3 to study are verses 7 through 13. These are where you find the keys. These are the keys. Revelations chapter 3, verses 7 through 13 are the verses we have to study to really understand the mysteries we're witnessing. Okay? Starts with verse 10, where this is where you get the verse about grace in the hour of trial. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. So this is the prophecy Ptolemy Philadelphus attempted to pervert and, swap out in such a way that it is his community, his family, himself that receives grace on Judgment Day. This is the prophecy. This is the prophecy that Jane Lee and William Penn and others that we're going to show attempted to manipulate to mimic fulfillment of the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia, but have nefarious intentions embedded in it. Okay? So, It's important to understand Philadelphia because Philadelphia and Is It Real? They're the same thing. They are enacted historical events that were designed to mimic fulfillment of a prophetic timeline, but they actually have nefarious intentions embedded in them. Okay? So the nefarious intentions embedded in Philadelphia, one we've already mentioned. They wanted to resurrect the Roman Empire in such a way that the prophecy of grace through judgment would be inverted and fall upon the empire. The other thing they wanted to do was steal the prophetic birthright of God's favor from the lost tribes of Israel to advance Rome's crusade. So now, let's dive a little deeper into this one right here. And anyone that is familiar with my works, Great Mystery Philadelphia, and all those related works, y'all know this ain't nothing new. This ain't nothing new. These teachings, I've been building on for a while. It's just that now what the times that we are living in, it's making this work more relevant. People are being able to see like, oh, I don't have to live in Philadelphia to have this, to see that this information is relevant. So now we've already mentioned this, that Philadelphia is the sixth church or community prophesied in the message to the seven churches in Revelations, right? And it's the only community to receive a beneficent prophecy. And that prophecy is in verse 10. We already reviewed that, okay? So now, the characters that are responsible for orchestrating this, members of the Philadelphian Society of London, John Portage, Jane Lee, and William Markham being the key characters. William Markham was the first governor of Pennsylvania, okay? And a major behind-the-scenes player of the establishment of the city of Philadelphia, okay? So all of this is the prophetic stage for what is known as William Penn's Holy Experiment, where, we find in William Penn's prayer engraved on City Hall, he says in his prayer, my soul prays to thee praise to God for thee, that thou mayst stand in the day of trial, that thy children may be blessed of the Lord, and thy people saved by his power. Yeah. Oh, I skipped a line, excuse me. Let me reread that. My soul prays to God for thee, that thou mayest stand in the day of trial, that thy children may be blessed of the Lord, and thy people saved by his power. So what this shows is, again, many people will say, oh, William Penn named Philadelphia that because it's a city of brotherly love. No. This is an echo of what is known as William Penn's Holy Experiment, in which William Penn more or less said, hey, God, if I can create a colony where those that I colonize and the gathered churches of London can come together and live in oneness, may my colony be saved on Judgment Day. And William Penn's holy experiment is embodied in William Penn's prayer for Philadelphia. Okay? But the unspoken dimension to William Penn's holy experiment, just like any scientist. If a scientist is going to conduct an experiment, what's he going to do before that experiment? He's going to research. He's going to research because he wants to create the conditions that is going to make his experiment a success, right? So the Rosicrucians, the Philadelphian Society, these boys that, you know, were the masterminds behind these manipulations of prophetic timelines. They studied the Table of Nations. They studied the geography as it's detailed in the Book of Enoch. They studied, prophecy, end time prophecy, what was actually supposed to go down. And they identified the place where, according to Enochian geography, if you were there at the end time, you would be able to safely witness the fulfillment of prophecy and not catch the judgment. And they called that place the 40th parallel in the wilderness. And again, those that keep up with my works, they know that I have a whole series on YouTube called the 40th parallel. Check it out. Okay? So we go deep in that. They call the people who, if we intermingle with these people, we're going to be saved on Judgment Day because these people are the ones prophesied to, receive that grace. They called them a couple of names. Jane Lead called them Sarah types, Sarah being the wife of Abraham. So basically, Abrahamic types, Sarah types. Okay? They also called them the woman of the wilderness, which harkens on to prophetic imagery found in Revelations of the woman clothed with the sun who throws the deceiver of the nations into the abyss and fulfills millennial prophecy by establishing the 1,000 years of peace. So this is the woman that they labeled, the woman in prophecy that they labeled the people that they were like, hey, let's go find these people. All right? And so this is the intentions William Markham executed in establishing Philadelphia on the 40th, in the wilderness, on the 40th parallel. And this is why Johann Kelp, the first Rosicrucian, established his order, the woman of the wilderness, right here in Philadelphia. Okay? Another thing the birth of Philadelphia was supposed to do was steal the birthright of God's favor from the lost tribes of Israel to advance Rome's crusade to retake Jerusalem. This is where we're getting more relevant. I said we got to overstand Philadelphia. I know it's like, where you going with all of this? But, you know, patience is a virtue. You got to be a turtle to go down the rabbit hole of prophecy. You know, as my brethren Red Pill said, this ain't nothing you could look at on TikTok or short or Instagram, because this ain't no scrollable information. This ain't nothing you can put in a 60-second scroll. This work is from a scroll. This work is a scroll. So you got to be a turtle to go down the rabbit hole of prophecy. Take your time, right? But a mystical truth shared among the early colonizers. Johann Kelp, the first Rosicrucian, William Penn, and really I'm extended to the Penn family. William Markham was William Penn's cousin, okay? So the Penn family, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, all of these boys, they considered the Algonquin speakers of North America, lost tribes of Israel. A lot of them were informed on this topic by a contemporary of theirs, a man named James Adair, who in 1775 wrote a book called The History of American Indians, where he put forth a 23-point argument on how the American Indians are the lost tribes. He said how they divided and organized their tribes, which was usually a system of 12 or 13, their worship and name of the Most High, Yahovah, their notions of theocracy and the belief and administration of angels and ancestors, their language and dialects, their manner of counting time and calendar systems, their prophets and high priests, festivals, fasts, and religious rituals, their sacrifices, their ablutions and anointings, their laws around uncleanliness, abstinence of unclean things, marriage, divorces, and the penalties of adultery, how they organize their cities as cities of refuge, the purification ceremonies, the ornaments they wore, the manner in which they cured the sick, the way they buried their dead, the way they mourned their dead, the way they cared for family members of deceased, the way they named themselves, as well as their traditions, accounts that they shared with English writers, Spaniard conquistadors, as you know, compared throughout all of the Americas. Okay, so why all of this is relevant is because early national policy was based on this knowledge. And to understand that, we need to know that this man right here, Elias Boudinot, excuse me, I had to drink some tea. I'm going in. Hope y'all are with me. So now, Boudinot. We talked about, hey, let's say you consider yourself a man of power and influence, and you want to manifest that power in the ultimate way possible. What are you going to be doing? Controlling, manipulating, and determining the outcome of historic and prophetic timelines. There's any one man that we can study to see how that plays out. There's any one man that if we can study who has controlled, manipulated, and determined the prophetic stage that we see today and the national players we see on it. United States and Is It Real in particular is this man, Elias Boudinot. If we want to know our role in it, our role meaning those indigenous of the Americas, we got to study this man right here, Elias Boudinot. He was born right here in Philadelphia to a wealthy family. He was the fourth president of the Continental Congress from 1782 to 1783. He was a signer of the Declaration of Independence. If you research Boudinot, they're gonna label him a forgotten father. I don't think he's a forgotten father. He's a ignored father. He's an abandoned father because his legacy is so deep. If we knew the fullness of it, you know, it would, it's easier to say George Washington is the father of our country and keep it at that, right? With all of the mythological, glorifying stories around George Washington's leadership. But we're going to see whose legacy is impacting what we are seeing and feeling and experiencing day to day right here in the prophetic stage of 2024. Is it George Washington or is it this man right here, Elias Boudinot? Okay? But let's keep going. I don't mean to be getting spun out on you, but you know, I do want to set the stage of the importance and the relevance of knowing this man's work. Okay? Boudinot, like I said, he was born of a wealthy Philadelphian family. Their estate would be in the, I guess what we would call the Rose Hill Mound community of Philadelphia. That's near Roosevelt Boulevard and Rising Sun Avenue, the intersection there. Okay. There you'll find Boudinot Street. You'll also find Rose Hill Cemetery, St. Ambrose Rectory. Okay. There's also a street there called Banks Way. We're going to see the relevance of that. Okay. So another thing, Boudinot is important historical feat he's responsible for. In 1782, he drafted and ratified the peace treaty with England. So he wrote and approved it. Okay? And he was appointed by George Washington, once Washington was president, to be the first director of the U.S. Mint. These two events are related. We're going to talk about that. Okay? But what's most relevant is that Boudinot wrote a book called A Star in the West. Listen to this subtitle. A humble attempt to discover the long-lost 10 tribes of Israel, preparatory to their return to their beloved city, Jerusalem. So here it is. Don't believe Ross Ben. Get this book. Let me see. Do I have where I can just pull it right up? Bam. Don't believe Ross Ben. Y'all got to read this thing yourself, you know, where here it is in, you know, plain English and recorded text for you to see. Don't believe Ross Ben. I'm not going to get all super deep in it, but what he breaks down is like, hey, these lost tribes over here in the Americas, they got providence. They got God's grace. Let's fulfill end time prophecy and use them to retake Jerusalem and rebuild a new Jerusalem. Yo, important. Y'all got to check this out. Don't believe Ross Ben. Don't believe it. Okay? I'm going to summarize it for you now. But again, this is going to be something we're going to go deep in this in our Patreon community. Okay? So, in A Star in the West, Boudinot advocates that the lost tribes of the Americas, you know, and the U.S. had an opportunity to unite these lost tribes with their Jewish brethren. Both groups could then be united under a Christian banner and provide the salvation for all mankind. And with this providence of the lost tribe, Americans would lead the way into the fulfillment of millennial prophecy, the advent of the 1,000 years of peace. Okay? And all of this would culminate with natives leading America into a rebuilt New Jerusalem. What? So what is it really state today? What is it we see today? The near fulfillment of Boudinot's attempt of manipulating a prophetic timeline, but embedding a nefarious intention in it. Okay? So again, you gotta read Star in the West. This, if you, I've listened to pundits on Fox, CNN, and ABC attempt to explain the prophetic stage of what we're seeing. Why a man like former President Trump was rallied behind by right-wing evangelicals once he started doing things in the Middle East that they considered fulfillment of end-time prophecy. And yeah, Noam Chomsky, I've heard him reasoning on it. Who, you know, Noam Chomsky's a major scholar. My humble opinion, 40-year student of history, mystery, and prophecy. They missing the mark. Why? Because they're not factoring this man right here, Elias Boudinot. Okay? Because it's this man right here, beyond writing A Star in the West, his legacy. He put things in motion. He put national policy. He put social and cultural norms of quote unquote American society in place that has set the stage for what we see today. Okay? So we got to study this man's legacy beyond A Star in the West. to really have a fuller understanding of what's going on. Okay? And start with this understanding that Boudinot spearheaded the establishment of the American Society for the Amelioration of the Condition of Jews. So now, what is this organization? This is the precursor. This is the organization that's almost as old as the nation. Because we got to know this. Let me clarify something, okay? Many people think this country was born in what year? 1776. That's the story we're told, right? No, that was when the revolt occurred, right? Revolution occurred with the Declaration of Independence. But the United States was not recognized as a nation on the world stage until 1792 with the signing of, 1782 with the signing of the Treaty of Paris. Okay? So when Boudinot established the American Society for the Amelioration of the Condition of Jews, he established this organization that was basically as old as the nation. And what is this organization? It's the precursor to what we know today as AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, which we know holds enormous sway over Congress and the political affairs that go on in Washington, D.C. today. And when you ask, how does AIPAC hold so much political sway? You know, how did that happen? How could it be that Benjamin Netanyahu, another foreign head of state, during the Obama presidency, could come to the United States and address a Congress directly? How many protocols between the executive and legislative branches were violated when a foreign head of state comes and addresses the law and policy makers of Congress directly? How can that happen? This is why. Because AIPAC's roots run real deep. They were planted by Elias Boudinot with the establishment, dang near the establishment of the nation. Boudinot wrote another book called The Age of Revelation, which is the doctrinal foundation of American evangelicalism. So American evangelicalism, the political force driving support, unconditional support for Is It Real? Here it is right here. The major tenets that America is a Christian nation charged with a mission to fulfill some important end-time prophecy, that Christians should use Judaism against Islam to retake Jerusalem. All of these tenets, important tenets of American evangelicalism, is in Boudinot's other book, Age of Revelation. Don't believe Ross Ben. They're free PDFs online on the archive.org website because, again, he is a founding father, okay? Beyond writing the Age of Revelation, which is the foundation of American evangelicalism, to make sure that idea of America being a Christian nation, aware of end time prophecy and all of that. Boudinot established the American Bible Society in 1815 and became the first president, okay? And based right out of here, right here in Philadelphia. So you know how back in the day, you go to a hotel, there'd be a Bible in every room. And there used to be cats walking around the community handing out Bibles. This is all Boudinot's legacy, okay? Yeah, man. As I say, this man didn't just read prophecy and write about prophecy. He put things in motion to manipulate these timelines, okay? And another deep, something I find synchronistic, and you'll see it in The Star in the West. Raspen ain't making this up. How does Boudinot describe himself? As a 40-year student of history and prophecy. His two books together, A Star in the West and Age of Revelation combined, are the foundation of Mormonism, which is known as America's true religion. The major tenets you find: that Indians are Israelites, that Americans are Israelites who are Christian either by blood or oath, that the Constitution is a divinely inspired document. All of these tenets of Mormonism, Boudinot is the architect of them, okay? And it also explains Mormonism's obsession with genealogy and bloodline tracing. Why? Because they want to know the Algonquin roots in these bloodlines. Why? Because they're the lost tribe and they got in their birthright the providence that they want to use to advance Rome's crusade. Okay? And I'm gonna show you how, you're gonna see this thing, you're gonna see how this manifests, okay? Boudinot created the first boarding school for Indian children and began the policy of culturally displacing indigenous children through institutionalization. The archetype student of his first institution was named Galagina Uwati, also known as Buckwati. It's the image you see right here. Okay? Wow. This man, they mind polluted him so deeply. Some call it brainwashing, but if I wash my brain should be clean, right? I call it mind pollution because it's corruption of his mind. This man's mind was polluted so deeply. He renamed himself. Guess what? he named himself Elias Boudinot. And under the name Elias Boudinot, he claimed leadership of the Cherokee nation, of which he was a descendant, and signed the Treaty of New Echota in 1835, which was the justification used to enact the Cherokee Trail of Tears. Wow. So he swapped the identity of himself onto the indigenous, right? Then he presented a star in the west to the Society of the Cincinnati. Now, let me attempt to explain who the Society of the Cincinnati is real quick. We know one of the tenets that this nation was founded upon is that there should be no inherited birthright. Couldn't be a king or a nobleman, and that birthright earn you political power, right? But at the same time, you had officers of the American Revolution and their French counterparts who felt like, yo, we got blood and skin in the game, and that's earned us some birthright, authority for us and our family, our lineage, our offspring. So that's who the Society of the Cincinnati is. Okay? Each state had each of the original 13 colonies. Each of the original 13 colonies has a chapter of the Society of the Cincinnati. And the French counterparts, ones like Lafayette, who served in the American Revolution under George Washington, right? But he was a Frenchman. So Lafayette and his French counterparts, they also earned membership in the Society of Cincinnati. After Elias Boudinot presented a star in the West to them, they said, yo, we're the true Americans. We want an indigenous identity. And they renamed themselves the Tammany Society after Chief Tammany, the so-called signer of Penn Treaty. And after that, they made Chief Tammany the patron saint of the United States. So Chief Tammany became the patron saint, the saint that's prayed to for providence, for the nation. So Elias Boudinot swapped the birthright to advance Rome's crusade. As we said, he drafted and ratified the peace treaty with England. He was also appointed by George Washington the first director of the U.S. Mint. These two things were related. Why? Because United States currency wasn't recognized on the world stage as legitimate currency until it became an instrument of debt to pay off war debt. And what's even deeper about it is when, hey, don't believe Ross Ben, read the peace treaty with England, okay? that this man drafted and approved. How many people signed off on it with him? I don't know. Because the fourth article of the peace treaty says both England and the United States have to pay off their war debt. Automatically, a question pops up in my mind, right? Number one, why am I worried about what my enemy is doing with their money? And why am I agreeing what's going to happen with my money after the war in relation to them? The only answer that I could come up with is that Boudinot set in motion the pattern of the United States going into war debt, fighting a war with an opponent who one person is funding both sides. So we know that's a whole nother rabbit hole. And there's certain families who is kind of documented historically that they set up banks in different countries throughout the world and engaged in that practice. So here we have Boudinot setting that stage, you know? When we read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, what does he say? He says money is debt. I didn't understand that fully until I understood what the US dollar is established by Elias Boudinot, going back to the first minting, that the value in the US dollar is its ability to pay off war debt, you know? So money is debt, you know? And why is this relevant? What's going on with Congress today? Congress is on the verge of shutdown over the spending bill and increasing the debt limit. And, you know, how do we get out of this cycle? How do we get into this cycle? Okay. So, all right, excuse me that I wasn't keeping up with the slide. But I mentioned this, that, yeah, treaty this man wrote and ratified, set the pattern for U.S. government going into debt to pay for war that, you know, the people funding the war, funding both sides. Man. So all of this gives a new perspective on the things we're seeing today. Gives a new perspective on the U.S. entanglement in world wars, you know, Pearl Harbor, having the Tuskegee Airmen, right? Gives whole new insight to all of the aid the U.S. sends to Israel and Ukraine, the land of Ashkenaz. It gives whole new insight into the double standard we see with Israeli-U.S. relations in regard to the United Nations as it relates to international morality. And this is a problem. This is a problem. We have to be able to get along better in the world community. And how Israel sometimes appears to operate outside of the realm of international morality. And the U.S. provides the unconditional support. It's not a good look. Got to do better. But, you know, we look at what we're seeing today. We got to keep one thing in mind. What's this thing really about? Is it just about occupying Palestine? On some levels, Rome's crusade is about that. Yeah. But there's deeper levels to this. We have to keep in our mind. We're looking at cats that are dealing with the ultimate forms of magic, the control, manipulation, and determination of historic and prophetic timelines, right? And there's something else that's going on with the establishment of is it real? And it's like they can't just retake the land and retake Jerusalem. There's something else they got to do, right? Something else they really driving to do. When I say they, because right here, like, who are they, Ross Ben? The political Zionist Jews. Not all Jews that dwell in is it real? Just like there is opposition and polarity to, you know, what we see today in the United States. There's polarity in is it real today? But who is the driving force behind it? Political Zionist Jews. You also see Jesuits and the Vatican really promoting this establishment of reestablishment of this new temple on what is considered in Islam the third holiest place after Mecca and Medina. Where currently the Al-Aqsa Mosque is located, right? Another group that and who identified these groups? Stephen Stars, who's another researcher that presented at this same Free Your Mind conferences that I'm talking about. Stephen Stars is another researcher on this topic, and he identifies these three groups that a part of their agenda is establishing a new Solomonic temple where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is currently located. And again, political Zionist Jews, Vatican and Jesuits, and Stephen Starr says the third group are Freemasons. Okay? I'm going to add a fourth group, American evangelicals. And that ties in Elias Boudinot's legacy, and it explains what we're seeing today. Okay? Where is this coming from? What prophecy are they attempting to manipulate and establishing this temple in the New Jerusalem? It goes back to this prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia. And these key verses, 7 through 13. In this instance, it's verse 12, which says, the one who is victorious, the one who at the end of end time prophecy, they're the last man standing. I see a lot of ones today saying they want to be the alpha man, right? I want to be the omega man. I want to be the last man standing in end times. And that's what this temple in the New Jerusalem is. It's attempting to capture that part of end time prophecy. Verse 12 says, the one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Oh, here's the temple. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God. What? The New Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven. And I will also write on them my new name. So this prophecy we see attempting to be fulfilled. And is it real? It's a continuation of the manipulation of the prophecy of the Church of Philadelphia, Revelations chapter 3. And why? Like, why is this so important, man? They putting a lot into this. You know it. Because the New Jerusalem is the end game of biblical prophecy. When you read the final chapters of Revelation, like Revelations 21, 22, you see the New Jerusalem, Eden is restored. We once again have a direct and personal relationship with nature. We ain't got to buy and sell and utilities and all of that to live. The woman with the clothed with the sun throws the deceivers of the nations into the abyss and brings about 1,000 years of peace. Do you think the deceivers of the nations want that to happen? No. So what are they going to do? They're going to deceive the nations by enacting historical events that mimic fulfillment of biblical prophecy, but have nefarious intentions embedded in them. So I hope this has inspired us to put ourselves in the right place in our relationship with the flow of space-time, so we could see these mystical revelations, and study this thing and get a fuller understanding, And why? Because if we do so, hey, we might be able to work this thing to our, our grace. How? Hey, keys right here in this same prophecy. Because chapter 9 says, verse 9 says, I will make those who are the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars. I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have, so no one will take your crown. Meditate on that. And I'm going to leave y'all with the words of His Majesty in his final and last speech before the world, before the United Nations. It's a speech that's as relevant as when he uttered these words as they are today. The name of this speech is known historically as the final judgment upon the world. We need to hold this in our hearts and our minds as we proceed into 2024. The great nations of the world would do well to remember that in the modern age, even their own fates are not wholly in their hands. Peace demands the united efforts of us all. Who can foresee what spark might ignite the fuse? It is not only the small and the weak who must scrupulously observe their obligations to the United Nations and to one another. The stakes are identical for every one of us, life or death. We all wish to live. We all seek a world in which men are free of the burdens of ignorance, poverty, hunger, and disease. We shall all be hard-pressed to escape the deadly rain of nuclear fallout. Should catastrophe overtake us, this then is the ultimate challenge. Where are we to look for our survival or the answers to questions which have never before been posed? We must look first to Almighty God, who has raised man above the animals and endowed him with intelligence and reason. We must put our faith in him that he will not desert us or permit us to destroy humanity, which he created in his image. And we must look into ourselves, into the depths of our souls. We must become something we have never been, and for which our education and experience and environment have ill prepared us. We must become bigger than we have ever been, more courageous, greater in spirit, larger in outlook. We must become members of a new race, overcoming petty prejudice, owing our ultimate allegiance not to nations, but to our fellow humanity within the human community. Yes, I. With that message, I pray for peace, not Pax Ramona. You know, the certificate we get upon death. It says RIP, but real peace. On the planet. Yes, I give thanks.